Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction, Emily, and thank you so much to everyone involved in planning this year's LPC forum. I'm really excited to be here and to share this information with you all. And just to be sure, you can all throw me a thumbs up. We can see slides. Awesome. So getting to know us, I'm Corinne Guimont. I'm a digital scholarship coordinator here in the library, also part of Virginia Tech Publishing. And I'll let Caitlin introduce herself.
I'm Caitlin. I'm the publishing services specialist for Virginia Tech Publishing. So I do some book production stuff and run support on various things. And then Anita Walz wasn't able to be with us today, but she's our assistant director of open ed and scholarly communication.
And I'm going to also throw a huge shout out to Heather Blicker, who's here. She's one of our resident librarians in open education, and she's going to help us with some of the breakout rooms. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Heather. If you want to help us get to know you, why don't you throw your name, title, and institution in the chat when you have an opportunity, and let us know if you administer any platforms and which ones.
And while we're taking a peek at some of that information real quick, today we're going to go over kind of what we do at Virginia Tech in terms of the platforms we administer, tools that we offer. And then we're going to split out into 3 breakout rooms led by myself, Caitlin, and Heather, where we'll take some notes and pull together some ideas. And then we'll come back for a whole group discussion and kind of share out maybe what we discussed in those breakout rooms or any other ideas that might pop up as we're discussing things.
So first we'll go over a little bit about why we offer these various publishing platforms. We use a bunch of different kinds and they help us when it comes to hosting our Virginia Tech Publishing and our OER projects. So if someone wants to do their own project and put it up on a site, that is an option that's available to them. That's part of our DIY publishing that we do some in association with publishing where we do some a la carte services, and the different platforms help us determine how much help our authors, our professors need, and if they even need us at all. These platforms help us typeset books. They help us get ebooks up online. They help us develop capacity to publish more projects. So as long as we have, we try to offer as many platforms as possible that allow faculty and staff and student workers and students to publish things either on their own or with us. And the more options that we have available, the more projects we're able to put out and make available to the readership. And it helps us avoid questions of whether or not we're going to just post and host, and helps us stay involved at the ground level with different projects. Next.
So platforms that we administer, like many of you that I'm seeing in the chat right now, we do administer Pressbooks. Also very similar to some of the other book tools that I saw mentioned there. We also have Overleaf. That is offered a lot for folks on campus doing DIY publishing with journals or posters, stuff like that. We also have Domain of One's Own, which we use a lot when it comes to more of the digital humanities and non-traditional publications. And then we do have an institutional repository, VTechWorks, that we're not going to go into detail today, but we know that it will come up in our conversation. So we did kind of want to mention that. The reason we're not going into detail is because we actually have a separate group in the library that manages VTechWorks or institutional repository. That's not done by our publishing services team. And then since I have seen a lot of OJS and stuff, I do want to mention that we do have Ubiquity for our journals. And if that comes up at all, we're happy to discuss that. And then kind of general things that cover all of these platforms as we get into them. We do want to emphasize that for a lot of these, we do repurpose some existing institutional policies and procedures. For example, the university has an acceptable use policy. that we link to here and there. So with something like VT domains, where anybody can really create, VT domains is our domain of one's own platform, but where anybody can really create a website, rather than saying you can post this or you can host this on your website, we just kind of defer to that acceptable use policy that kind of outlines what they should and shouldn't share. This kind of does two things. It saves us time for writing those policies and sharing those policies and conveying that information. It also provides the users of these tools with something that they're already familiar with. They're not looking at, they're not jumping into a new tool, kind of wondering, you know, what can I do or can't I do with this? They already know, or hopefully they have a good idea of what's going on with that acceptable use policy. And there are some others on campus and whatnot that cover things like preservation, or in the library, things like preservation that we also repurpose here. We do a lot of coordination between those of us that administer tools. So for example, with Pressbooks, myself, Caitlin, and Anita, that's kind of what brought us all together. So the three of us have been administering that for a little over 2 years now, almost 2 years.
Probably, yeah.
And then there's some coordination with other folks that we'll mention as we kind of dive deeper into each tool. That helps us kind of manage those new accounts requests as those come in, and then also any problems, or both logistical or technical, that might come up as we're offering these to users. Speaking of accounts, we do track our users and the space that they're using. So something that might come up in our discussion is we do pay for some of these tools for user accounts or for space, or some variation of both. So it's very important that we work together to track how that space or those user accounts are being used, so that we don't go over, or that we know when we're going over if maybe we need to request more or work through that with our finance team as that comes up. And then with all three of the tools that we're going to cover, we use the tech support offered through the vendor specifically. That kind of alleviates some of the stuff from us. We do obviously still get questions, and we try and help when we can, but we can kind of lean on the platforms themselves for some of that support.
So we have some standard consultation practices that we use for a variety of these projects used within these platforms. Initially, to get the word out there, we offer workshops through the library and the university's professional development network. So people, faculty, and staff can come and do like a little crash course about the platform. And from there, a lot of people come to the workshops because they have a project in mind, or it helps them formulate an idea, or it helps them realize that, something that they wanted to do is now like super possible. And from there, they'll a lot of times schedule an appointment with Corinne or me or Anita to talk about their project and what they want to do with it, who they want to make it accessible to, what kind of elements are involved in the project. And from there, we'll give them some recommendations on which platform to use and the process in which to use it. And we encourage them to think about what the project actually is. You want form to follow function. So a lot of times we'll sometimes get authors that will say, oh, I want to publish a book. And then we'll be talking to them about their material or their topic. And we'll be like, oh, this doesn't actually sound like a book, but this sounds like a really great project to host within VT domains, or to keep as a living DH document in Pressbooks. And so we try to listen to what their ideas are and help them pick a platform that's going to fit their project in the best way possible. And we encourage all faculty and staff and students who pursue these kinds of projects to implement accessibility and the best practices with that. And so we'll use accessibility features within Adobe PDF or certain online programs that are free and available to download to do some accessibility checks. And we strongly encourage alt text If they can't provide their own alt text, sometimes we'll arrange to have them meet with someone who would be able to provide it for them. We sometimes are in a position where we can provide it for them. So I've written some alt text for certain projects. So we definitely try to drive home accessibility when it comes to sitting down and talking with the authors about their projects and how we can make them accessible within the platform that's going to fit their vision the best. So first, I'm going to talk a bit about how we administer Pressbooks. That's the platform that I work in the most. I probably have the most of the platforms that we administer. This is probably the one that I work with people on the most. So this is kind of what Pressbooks looks like. Particularly, this is Introduction to Earth Science, a book we've done through Pressbooks, and it's a very nice one. But that's what it looks like, and I'm sure a lot of people I've seen in the chat are super familiar with how Pressbooks looks. But when we go into our breakout rooms, if you haven't seen the inside of Pressbooks, you'll get a glimpse into that when we're in our breakout rooms. Okay, so next. So yeah, again, when it comes to administering Pressbooks, they've already touched on consultations. This one's no different than any of our other platforms. Authors who are interested in publishing, they come to us. Pressbooks is one of our first go-tos when we're looking at a project that, well, at least for me, it's one of my first go-tos when I am author is presenting an idea for a book to me. And if they have a manuscript, I try to look at Pressbooks as the first option for a platform. And usually I'll sit down with the author and ask them about the different kinds of elements they have in their manuscript. If they have overly complicated tables, lots of images, that sort of thing, just to see like how feasible the typesetting within Pressbooks is going to be. Sometimes authors will have a student worker or a graduate assistant in mind that they want to do the typesetting for them. Sometimes they don't, and we take on the typesetting role. It just kind of depends on the timeline and working with the author's vision. Again, we have those workshops. We just did one a few weeks ago, and we got a couple projects out of that for a workshop where we gave the rundown of, what Pressbooks is, what it can do, how you can use it, how we put it a little bit in conversation with what kind of licensing you would need for it to publish with us, and how that works and applies to Pressbooks. A lot of times people get really engaged in these workshops and they ask a lot of questions, and afterward we get approached and they say, oh, I want to publish a book, or I have an idea for a student project where they're going to work on their final project, and each of them is going to write a chapter, and based on what they have in mind, we'll decide whether or not the title seems like it's in association with title, so it's something that the author and their department handle almost completely on their own, and we just kind of run backup support. We provide the platform, we answer questions if they're running into issues with Pressbooks, or if they need some help with some certain customizations. Those are in association with titles, where we kind of lend our services to the author, but largely let them take it in the direction they want to go, and Pressbooks is really useful for that. And it's also really useful in classrooms with students. I've gone to classrooms and taught students about Pressbooks for these student projects, where each student is going to write a chapter, because you can control who gets access to what chapter. The other way we administer, we provide admin support. So if someone on campus needs help working their account, so we've had some people who have come to Pressbooks workshops in the past and gotten access to Pressbooks account, but then later either lost their password, forgot they had already registered for a Pressbooks account, weren't able to get in, never received the invite email. And so we kind of act as the go-betweens between the premium support within at Pressbooks. We do some of our own troubleshooting if there are some unusual glitches that happen within the program. that's kind of thing always comes up no matter what program you're using. We'll put on our detective hats and get to work and comb through some code that way sometimes. And then, oh, I see a question. Do you provide your own documentation for, well, actually, I'll get to the question maybe after, sorry. So then we also have full service, where an author is like, hey, I have this idea. It's really straightforward, but I want to run through the standard publishing process. So they hand us the manuscript. We do a copy edit on it. We typeset it. We do a proofread on it, and we handle the book, you know, through a very standard publishing workflow. And Pressbooks is the typesetting program rather than a collaborative tool. And then at the end, you know, Pressbooks is really great about being an all-in-one kind of program. So the title can live online, but you can also export to EPUB or PDF or a digital PDF. And so sometimes we just take care of all of it and use Pressbooks as our typesetting program, as opposed to something like InDesign. Some books are PDF and print only. So they're not always displayed within our Pressbooks, like our front catalog. And some of those will be titles that authors did independently. And we don't have our name on them, so we don't put them within our catalog. They will deposit them in the VTech or the VTech Works repository under their own name. And that's kind of part of the program where, you know, we provide the consultation and the admin support, but they kind of do the project largely on their own. And then some, but the ones that have our name on them will appear within the catalog. Let's see.
We'll get to questions before we go to breakouts after the other two. Does that sound good?
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Thanks. Yeah. All right.
So jumping, thank you, Caitlin, for covering.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
A lot in Pressbooks. So jumping to VT domains. So VT domains, like I said, is our version of Domain of One's Own, which is a service run by Reclaim Hosting. And it provides faculty, staff, and students on campus with opportunities to kind of have a space to host a website. So we've kind of been doing some DH work in publishing in the library for years, and a lot of times the requests coming in for DH were this request for like, can you host my DH project? And we were trying to move away from just simply hosting the site to maybe eventually doing more publishing on it, maybe some peer reviews and copy editing, stuff like that. So having the solution first for people looking to host their sites was kind of a goal here. This started as a partnership with TELOS, which is our Teaching Enhanced Learning and Online Strategies department on campus. I actually had to look up what the acronym was because I've just been calling them TELOS for so long. And they are interested in offering this as a tool to faculty on campus who are looking at kind of integrating some sort of web design experience within their classes. So we were able to partner together. That partnership, we split all of the costs totally. We split a lot of the responsibilities and all of that. It's similar to Pressbooks. We do offer consultations. Those are also kind of split between TELOS and us. So TELOS actually has a system where people can book a consultation online. So they have that set up this way. Whereas in the library, it's kind of like people come through me or somebody else in our department, and we meet with them one-on-one and kind of discuss those options depending on, again, what project do they want to do and is this the right fit. Sometimes people will come to me and say, I just want to host this website and I want to build this website, and it turns out that they really want to build a book. So I might say, actually, you should look at Pressbooks. And then we do offer some workshops. This is a fairly new service. So our first workshop was an introduction to VT domains that I actually taught this past spring, where I kind of just covered what is this service, and then also what does the back end look like? How do you get started with it? We also have some, since you can kind of install any platform you want on VT domains, including Omeka and Scalar and stuff, we do have some platform specific workshops. And our Omeka workshop was actually started before we even got VT domains up and running, where my colleague Kira Dietz, who's the Assistant Director for Special Collections and University Archives, her and I have been teaching these workshops for a few years now, where we do some basic Omeka workshops in the fall and then some deeper dives in the spring. But that kind of helps. Once somebody is set up in the platform of their choice on VT domains, they can then come and dive into a specific tool that they're looking at. As I said, for admin support, we kind of partner with Telos there. We have monthly check-in meetings where we look at, again, we track those user numbers. We look at how much space we're using up. If we've gotten any really weird requests or requests for help or requests for use, we kind of discuss that there. And then since this is a fairly new service, we're also been developing some additional policies there, specifically around what do we do with graduating students, since we do kind of pay by the seat for this tool and a lot of classes are using it and students graduate. Like, how do we determine when to offboard students and what's the best process for that? And then I will note that currently, this is most often used as part of course projects, but we are integrating it more and more into our publishing services as we go along. And last but not least, in terms of tools, Overleaf. So I'm sure many people are familiar with Overleaf. It's the LaTeX-based tool that kind of helps with journal articles and posters and whatnot. With Overleaf, we kind of let this one run itself. It's a single sign-on thing. Anybody on campus has it. People sign in through their campus thing. There's no requests for user accounts. There's no issues there. We do have an admin dashboard that we use to kind of check in on those user accounts and stuff every few months or so and see how that's grown and whatnot. And then there is some workshops taught. They're actually not taught by anybody in our publishing staff, though. Our engineering librarian, Sarah Over, actually teaches a workshop, since this is so commonly used in engineering, and she has a much better understanding of LaTeX than I do, so I very much appreciate her diving into that for us. Looking ahead, we've talked a lot about workshops. We think that's a great way to both teach these tools, but also to get the word out about them. We've talked about having a longer Pressbooks workshop, one that kind of goes into that deeper dive of some of the aspects of it, like user access or Creative Commons licensing. We don't have it listed here, but we've talked a little bit about maybe incorporating some H5P in there. And then we've also talked about having a larger publishing workshop that kind of goes over the various publishing platforms that we offer and how those might be used depending on the situation or the project that somebody is looking at it for. And then we've also discussed creating some learning communities on campus where people could get together who are regular users of these tools to then kind of learn from each other.
We are also looking to create a deeper, more involved Pressbooks user guide to help us, and when we consult with authors who are looking at their project and picking a platform, and we're hoping to create a more in-depth and detailed user guide that would help the prospective author and us at VTP determine whether their project is right for the Pressbooks platform. So looking at the potential limitations that we have on our end for typesetting and possibly potential limitations they have for what kind of files they can provide. And if they are having a graduate assistant do some of the typesetting or some of the work on the project, they're able to use this user guide to determine how much time that person may need, or if it's within the scope of their skill set. Another thing that we're kind of looking to start doing at once a year is to have an author day. Currently, we have an author night that honors various Virginia Tech authors, not just VTP authors, but authors professors who have worked at Virginia Tech that have published a book within the past year. And we're kind of hoping to expand that night into a full day where we can talk about our publishing platforms that we have in-house and kind of get the word out, get some knowledge out about what kind of platforms we have, what these platforms can do, and encourage faculty and staff to bring their projects to us so we can help them get off the ground.
So I see a lot of really fantastic questions in the chat. So I'm going to kind of ad hoc change up our schedule a bit, and let's answer these questions and then maybe do a short breakout room, maybe only like 10 minutes or so. So the first question looks like, do you provide your own documentation or asynchronous learning guidance as well as the workshops? Right now, we mostly point to the existing documentations that so many of the platforms themselves have already created. So the Pressbooks user guide has been really fantastic. So we point to that a lot. Although I will say I have some like quick, and even with VT domains, they have tons of resources available and documentation online. But I will say that I do have some like one-page like how-to documents saved on my computer that sometimes when I get a really commonly asked questions, I just upload and send that over email to folks. But we don't have necessarily public documentation, although as Caitlin just said, that's one of our goals. And then do you manage or review or manage peer review services when authors request it?
Yeah, we do for some of our projects, depending on the content and the topic. Our peer review system is not done within any of our platforms. It's usually done prior to putting the manuscript or the project into the platform.
And how do we determine whether or not a project will be full service publishing support for a particular project? And does demand ever outweigh our capacity?
So generally we it's a kind of a joint decision. I really enjoy the full service projects, especially because I think it helps cut down on confusion of who's doing what. But a lot of times that decision is made, in my experience, collaboratively with the prospective author, if they have someone that they already have in mind for typesetting, or if they're like, we've worked with several authors who have used the same faculty member to input work within like Pressbooks or something. So a lot of times it's collaborative in that sense, where we kind of decide together how involved we're going to be. But when it comes to like a student work project where the author, it's a professor who's running a class, and he or she has a final assignment where each student writes their own chapter, that comes to us, and that's a project that we have, very little involvement with. So it's something that we usually determine together, but sometimes depending on the nature of the project, it just kind of becomes obvious during the consultation phase whether or not it'll be a full service one. Does demand ever outweigh your capacity?
Sometimes.
Sometimes it kind of depends. So we have a lot of professors who really like to maintain a decent amount of control over their project. So we do find some balance that way. But yeah, sometimes demand does outweigh our capacity, but sometimes that just means that we have a student worker or a volunteer get on board with the project, or we push the project back. A lot of times in publishing, authors don't get to choose their pub date. And so if we need to push a project back, especially if it's not reliant on a certain pub date, like if it's not, needed for a class immediately, we'll just push it back until we can get to it. At least that's been my experience. Obviously, Corinne, feel free to, jump in if I start answering something. And
I would say, yeah, I think that tend to agree. I mean, it's always, if the demand does begin to outweigh our capacity, I'd say similar to the other thing, we have a conversation with our authors about it and, say, look, this isn't something that can get done tomorrow. This would be a rough timeline. And does that work for you? And I don't know if we've ever really had an issue with somebody being very upset about it. I mean, there's sometimes some pushback and we do what we can, and it's just a back and forth conversation.
Yeah.
For VT domains, how does the library commit to hosting the domain? Is there an MOU or something similar? And how do we sunset projects? That's a very big question and a really good question. It's just the main thing with VT domains is that they are actually technically hosted by Reclaim as a third-party hosting company. So that solved the big issue of how the library decides to commit. And it isn't a single sign-on option as well. So anybody who has a vt.edu email address can create an account. There is a approval form that we have to go to. So if somebody says, hey, I want to create a website for, my personal business, we say, sorry, that doesn't fit with the university's policies around this tool. And that's just kind of how it is, unless, well, there's been some discussion about how that might fit if it's like a business class case. But in general, like, we do kind of keep track of those requests. How do we sunset projects? We are currently looking at, so as long as the person remains at Virginia Tech, they can keep their account going. If they leave the university, if they're a graduating student, their account will go away. We are still kind of working out like how long that would be. I think we're leaning towards at least 6 months to give time. And then they would be given the options of kind of zipping up the whole thing and taking it with them to someplace else, or they can individually host their website with Reclaim directly. And it's actually a really reasonable fee. It's like $30 a year, I want to say, which for web hosting is really not bad. And then, is there any support from library IT or campus research IT? When it comes to projects that are hosted directly by the library, we do have that. When it comes to these projects that are hosted through vendors, they're not as involved, but they're definitely aware of it, and we keep them kind of in the loop as we have that. Through our campus central IT, we have had conversations with them about VT domains. It's something that they themselves are very excited about, because they also get a lot of these requests for hosting stuff. And if it's something that can alleviate that for them, they're definitely on board. And then last question we have here is, how well attended are the workshops and what are the formats? Our last Pressbooks workshop probably had only about 7 people or so, but it was very engaged 7 people. And I'd say that's kind of standard. We have usually anywhere between like 6 or 7 all the way up to about 20. I think the most I've ever had is about 20 in a workshop. And I don't know, Caitlin, I don't think you haven't had more than that, right?
No, yeah, that sounds right.
And they're typically that we do both hybrid and online. It used to be all in person, or hybrid and online, hybrid and in person. It used to all be in person. Obviously in 2020, we moved them to all online. Now we like to offer that option of doing both. And it might differ depending on the tool. But we do have a university professional development network where faculty can get credit towards a new computer through taking these professional development workshops. So we post all of our workshops there, and then faculty are able to get credit through them. We also have a library calendar where we can post and share events. So we also try and share them all through there, and that tends to get word out maybe to some more graduate students and folks who don't necessarily get that fancy new computer. It's a really nice system in some ways. Sometimes it does feel like people are attending just to get their computer points, and at which point I'm just like, yeah, here you go, there's your attendance check. Let me know if you have questions. Okay, but we did again kind of shifted up time. So how about now we break into our breakout rooms? So myself and Caitlin and Heather will be leading a discussion in each breakout room. In Pressbooks, we have those questions posted. Nancy, would you be able to split us at random into 3 breakout rooms with Caitlin, Heather, and I? Hi, everyone. Welcome back.
Hi.
We're in the middle of a really great conversation in our group. So I'm really excited to hear how everybody else's conversation went. And I'll take notes. Caitlin, do you want to ask some questions?
Oh, sure. Do you want me to just go through the Pressbooks one, the ones we had? Just see if you had great thoughts on.
And if anybody else wants to diverge, feel free.
Yeah. I mean, so we just kind of started running through the questions. We actually didn't get super far into it, but we heard some cool things. So the first question: what tools do you administer and support or try to support your institution, and what does your library publishing program support specifically? We had a couple programs that I never heard of before, so I'll just throw that out there. I never heard of Janeway or Manifold, but so that we started talking a little bit about like what the university uses versus what the university library program uses, and some people where I found out were kind of new to the Pressbooks platform and stuff like that. So some good stuff there. Does anyone else want to share? Right.
Oh, go ahead.
Ditto. Cool. Thanks, Cheryl.
Sorry, that was not for you, Caitlin. That was
Oh, okay.
a question.
I was like, great.
I apologize.
I mean, we kind of did the platforms earlier too, so maybe the next question about programs integrating with other programs, I mean, in our group, we talked a bit about like how other people are doing the same model where you might have the exports from something integrated into your institution repository and then using Archive It for capturing the web version, which is something really similar that we do as well. So it's kind of great to hear that that's a similar process.
Oh yeah, cool.
We had someone talk about how they're looking into using DSpace as a learning object repository.
Awesome.
Interesting. What's a learning object?
So that's us and kind of OERs, basically, but
okay.
Because they don't totally fit in the way that we have our institutional repository structured.
Okay.
But yeah, DSpace. So we're thinking about using DSpace to host more than just our institutional repository, to have different types of collections in it, which other institutions already do.
Gotcha. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we actually do have a learning object repository. It's called Odyssey, and it's run out of our teaching and learning team, which is interesting as well, that there's kind of this other area happening outside that I forgot to mention earlier.
Cool. Neat.
Are there tools that are administered differently? I don't know, Caitlin, how did you guys have?
We got excited and we skipped ahead to number 4. So
that's nice. Okay. Oh yeah, we didn't get the chance to get to that question. That might be an interesting one to talk about. The boundaries question.
Can skip ahead to boundaries.
Yeah, boundaries are great. We should work on them all the time. How do you set boundaries? Offer referrals? How do you say no to a project while directing them to other resources, tools, or people? Really great questions in publishing and in life.
So we had people talk about how they're working on defining and articulating boundaries in a formalized document so that they can refer back to that, as well as referring back to the MOU to refresh faculty on their responsibilities.
Okay.
And also using copyright concerns as a reason to sort of stave off, the constant push. Does anyone from group 3 want to add anything else? We were in the middle of a great discussion on this when we had to come back.
Well, I don't want to stop us here, but I do see a lot of other really great questions popping up in the chat. So I'm going to maybe circle us back to some of those And then if anybody has other ideas to add to our notes, feel free. I will say our plan or our hope with this Pressbooks notes document that we've been creating is to kind of compile them and organize it a little bit more and share it back with the LPC community to kind of share what we've learned through this process. So hopefully you'll see more there. So scrolling back through the chat, I did see a question about cataloging our Pressbooks or MARC records, using MARC records. At Virginia Tech, we do catalog any books that we publish. So those go up to our cataloging team and they catalog it. And I'm assuming they do MARC records. They work their magic and it goes into our discovery layer in the library. We also send, if we have a print version of a book, we also send that down to our special collections department because they kind of capture that as part of the university record. And I think they have a version within their discovery layer as well. I also saw a question about Pressbooks included in OAI output. I actually don't know the answer to that.
I don't either.
I'll have to look into it.
Yeah. Heather, just to put you on the spot, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't.
That's something I guess our Pressbooks administration team is going to need to discuss.
Yeah, I know, that's great thought. That's great.
Yeah. And then we have the question that triggered the ditto. I would be really interested in seeing what you ask your culture in your Qualtrics forums. And I believe that was somebody else who mentioned a Qualtrics forum. So if somebody,
Yeah, I just put, well, I responded in the chat that I can share that information. I put my email address there. It's emily.stenberg@woostel.edu if anyone wants it. I definitely borrowed from other places, but they're proposal forms for a book or a journal where they need to answer a lot of questions before we commit to anything, and it gives a lot of information to help think through their projects.
awesome, thank you. And I see some conversations about preservation, portico and clocks that integrate with Janeway. So that's really good to know. I did not. Cheryl, did you know that based on our documentation?
I did.
Awesome. You wrote that part of our documentation. So shameless plug at 2:45, talking about platforms. Cheryl and Matt, Vaughn, and I are talking about some documentation that we've created on platforms. That might answer some of these questions, or it might make us ask more questions.
Is that published already or something you're working on?
In progress.
In progress. Okay.
You'll get to see it during the thing though, for sure.
Regarding boundaries, it's difficult when you want to do more and might have a tendency to help in any way you can, but you know that these boundaries have to be established and maintained. Yes.
Yes, agreed.
And then another note that we didn't get to the last question, but I wish we could do more to promote and ensure accessibility. Yes. I think that's something that I've been hoping for all along as well. I'll add that to our notes. I know Caitlin mentioned it in the presentation that sometimes she'll even work with authors to write alt text. And
Yep. Yeah.
I think that's something we would like to do more, but there's only so much of Caitlin.
Right. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, definitely done it. Definitely feel like someone else could probably do it better. And could probably be more consistent in their availability into doing it. But yeah, it all comes down to resources, time, money, all that. But yeah.
But sorry to abruptly cut things off, but I did just realize it is 2:14. So I did want to throw up this last slide just to say thank you, and thank you for kind of going with us as we figured out new schedules on the fly. And thank you to Nancy for helping with the breakouts and to Emily for helping host this session. All three of our emails are up there. on the screen. If you would like to reach out to us at any point with further questions, we'd be happy to chat.